Does the Bible say life begins at conception? Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I am a scholar of the Bible and religion. There are two different perspectives represented in the Bible regarding the beginning of human life, or better put, regarding the beginning of personhood. The oldest and the most well-represented position is that life begins at birth and at the drawing of the first breath. And this is not limited to just Genesis 2:7 and the statement that Adam became a nefesh chaya, a living soul, once the breath of life entered his nostrils. We see it also in the statement a few chapters later that the flood killed animals and humans and birds, everything that had the spirit of the breath of life in its nostrils. Additionally, when we look at the words that are used to mean life here, as in Genesis 2:7, nefesh chaya, nefesh means breath. And then when we look at the statement about the spirit of the breath of life, that is the ruach. Ruach means spirit, or fundamentally breath. So there are three words in the Hebrew Bible that are used to mean life and that are commonly translated life in English. And those are chaim, the basic word for life, ruach, breath, and nefesh, breath, because breath is fundamental to life within the Hebrew Bible, and this is why within Rabbinic Judaism and later Judaism, the drawing of the first breath is considered the crossing of the threshold into personhood. Now, there's another way to demonstrate that personhood begins at birth, and that is with Exodus 21, verses 22 through 25, where we see that if men are fighting and they accidentally injure a pregnant woman, if the fetus dies, there is a fine that is imposed by the husband, and it is arbitrated by judges. If the woman is injured or dies, then it is what is known as talionic justice, retaliatory justice, life for life, limb for limb, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, because the woman is a legal, moral person, and so if another person harms her, then the same harm is done to the perpetrator. The fetus is treated more as property than person, because not only is it a fine, it is a fine that is determined by the husband. We see another entity that is not treated as a full person in the very same chapter, and that is an enslaved person. An enslaved person, if they are killed by somebody's goring ox, 30 shekels is all the owner is on the hook for. But if a full person is killed by that goring ox, it is life for life. Now, society has imposed and prescribed a specific value on the life of an enslaved person. They are a human life, and they do have specific value to the society. No such value is prescribed for the fetus. It is considered the property of the husband. The husband is the one who determines the fine. The arbitrators are there to make sure that it is not exorbitant. We also see elsewhere in Exodus 21, where if a person beats their enslaved person to death, there will be a punishment. It is conspicuously not the death penalty, but they are punished. However, if they beat their enslaved person and they survive for a few days and then die, there is absolutely no punishment. It is understood that if the person survived for a while, the beating was not intended to kill them, but to be disciplinary, and therefore the text states, he is his money. Or in other words, he is his property. His death is punishment enough. There is no other punishment. So the slave is explicitly property in that instance, but a slave is closer to a person than a fetus is treated in Exodus 21. And folks who try to reread Exodus 21 to refer to just premature birth and no other harm to the infant or the death of the fetus, that reading has absolutely no leg to stand on. This is borrowed directly from the laws of Hammurabi, and this law is reflected in numerous other ancient Southwest Asian law codes, and it's always addressing the exact same two outcomes of a man injuring a woman, causing her miscarriage, causing her death. So this is absolutely what Exodus 21, 22 through 25 is about. Now, what is the other perspective in the Hebrew Bible? Well, this comes much later as we get into the Greco-Roman period, and that perspective is that life begins at the quickening, when the mother can begin to feel the fetus moving independently. And we see this in a couple of different ways. One way is with the Septuagint's rendering of Exodus 21, 22 through 25, because they misunderstand the Hebrew word ason, which means tragedy. This is the death of the woman. And they interpret it as having something to do with the Greek word soma, body, because they say if there is no body, if the fetus is not fully developed, then it is just a fine. If there is a body, if the fetus is fully developed, then it is life for life. So according to the Septuagint, if the fetus is fully formed, and that is usually identified as 40 days of gestation for a male fetus, 90 days of gestation for a female fetus, or it is linked with the quickening. And this is based on Greek philosophy. There were three different perspectives within Greek philosophy. One perspective was that ensoulment, or the event of the spirit entering the body, occurred at conception. The Aristotelian and the most popular idea was that the spirit entered the body at the quickening. And then there was another position that the spirit entered the body when the body made contact with air and when the infant began to draw breath. And the Septuagint seems to be siding with the Aristotelian view. And we see this as well in Ecclesiastes 11:5, maybe. This is a tricky Hebrew, but one way to read it is as saying, you don't know when breath comes to the bones in the womb. Now remember, nephesh and ruach, which can mean spirit, can mean soul, both fundamentally mean breath. And here the idea seems to be, according to this interpretation, you don't know how the quickening happens. You don't know how the fetus begins to move. And that is associated with breath / life coming to the bones. So according to Ecclesiastes 11:5, according to the Septuagint's interpretation of Exodus 21:22 through 25, life begins around the quickening. And this is actually the majority view within early Christianity. There are debates back and forth about conception, about the quickening, about birth, and all Christians are in widespread agreement that abortion at any point is unseemly, but they explicitly say, and the majority view is that upon the quickening, that's when it becomes a human life. That's when it becomes murder. This is the consensus view within Christianity until the 19th century. And then we have a number of different things converging to determine, no, we want to say that it is murder all the way back at conception. For the overwhelming majority of the history of Christianity, the consensus view was that life began at the quickening. Judaism rejected a lot of the Greek philosophical influence that directed the development of early Christianity. So when Rabbinic Judaism developed, they went back to the non-Greco-Roman interpretations of these scriptures, and Judaism argued that life begins at first breath, or when the head or an infant was born in breech, more than half of the body had left the birth canal. The rabbis talk about a fetus being just water until 40 days of gestation, at which point it is a part of the mother's thigh, which is a euphemism for the genitals. But it does not become a person, it does not become a nephesh, a soul, a life, until birth within Judaism, and that has been the consensus view of Judaism ever since. So when we look at the biblical texts and the history of interpretation up to the 19th century, two positions have dominance over all others. One, that life or personhood begins at birth. Two, that life or personhood begins at the quickening.